go.
Oh.
Woo! Could you hear that?
Good evening. I am sitting in today for our Chair of the Lake Mills Parks Board, Tim Sprecher, as the Vice Chair, Anita Martin here, and I'd like to call the March 10th meeting to order. Could we start out with a roll call, please?
Mary Schmager here.
Jacob Slobby here.
Mike Nesemann here.
Anita Martin here. Thank you. So let's quickly review what we have on the agenda here. We're going to be starting out with the Parks and Forestry Director's Report by Eric Schreiner, and then moving on to correction and/or approval of the Parks Board meeting minutes from our February 10th, 2025 meeting, going into public comments from people in the audience on Zoom, and then anybody who received any emails that's on the board. We'll move into new business, which will include a presentation by Mike Nesemann on the motorboat access to Bartel's Beach, a discussion and possible recommendation to request the Joint Rock Lake Committee to review motorboat usage at Bartel's Beach. Next on the agenda, we will go to a discussion about pollinator gardens, the use of native plants, and possible installation of habitat such as bird boxes and bat boxes on city-owned properties. Then announcements, and then we'll be discussing items for our April 10th 2025 meeting. So I think that's it to go ahead. So if we could start out, Eric, with our Parks Board Director report, please.
I have a few updates regarding the Girl Scout presentations and projects, including the pollinator garden stuff that I will hold until that actual discussion item. So if there are any questions regarding those, I'll touch base on them during then. Some of the highlights within the past month is we are still heavily doing pruning during this dormant season until April 15th. Staff have been working nearly daily on pruning. That will continue to stay the priority until we start doing parks cleanup and preparations for opening at the end of this month. We have completed our 2025 planting list. Within those plantings, we are going to be doing bare root plantings, which is something that we would still continue to do. It increases the amount of trees that we can plant each season. And this is going to be the first year that we're implementing a gravel bed system. What this gravel bed does is should allow for more retention of those species after planting. It allows for lower mortality rates within the trees just because there's not transplant shock on some of them. So this will be the first year that we are attempting to do that. Still reviewing urban forestry management plans. This will be a priority request of mine for the next year capital request for the budgeting. We currently do not have an active urban forestry management plan within the municipality, so looking to have that completed for next year. Lastly, we did have staff attend the WAA, which is Wisconsin Arborist Association Conference in Green Bay. I can provide probably, if you guys would like it, a rundown of the classes and some of the things that were learned at that meeting, if possible, at the end of this report. And then last, what I'm very excited for is we are moving forward with the actual fourth grade tree planting seminar, I guess you could say presentation for the fourth grade class on April 25th. That is Arbor Day. That will include all fourth grade students receiving a sapling. We're going to go through the importance of Arbor Day, the history behind it, importance of trees in general, and then just general tree care and planting instructions. And the nice thing is Smokey the Bear is confirmed to make an appearance there at that event, so I'm very much looking forward to that. We have listed the seasonal hirings and job openings for the Parks Department. I've had some interest. We did have those postings listed on the school district's job board, so I've had some interest on it. We're still fairly early in that process. Normally I would post these at the beginning of March. I did post them at the beginning of February, so we are ahead of the game, but I still have a few vacancies to look at for those positions, and hopefully we have some interested candidates. Depending on the price that comes back, this would either be something that I can complete this year or would be a capital request for next year, is updating the sound system within Commons Park. It is fairly aged, and it is something that I would like to have updated based on resident requests during difficulty hearing, especially during the Memorial Day presentation and ceremony in the park. We are getting all of our summer equipment prepared. We
Wait,
have
Eric,
not
can I-
yet removed.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question about the
Yes.
sound system?
Yep.
I'm just curious, given, I don't know what year that would have been in, but I know technology in that space, I'm sure, has changed a lot, and I'm just curious, is that something that that is possibility would go like wireless, or have you done
Yeah,
any
it
kind
would
of, I'm
be.
just curious where
Yep.
that might take us, and is there something that might be cost-effective, given, I think even as things have gotten more Bluetooth-based or whatever prices are, I have come down a lot, but I don't know, like, in this type of setting. So could you just share a little bit about what you know?
Yeah, they have. So currently there are two sound systems within the park, one being an actual tweeter or broadcast speaker that's on Main Street and that's specifically used for Town and Country Day parades. That is a non-powered speaker that we have to externally power, very much 1960s air raid siren type technology. The other one is the band shelter itself is wrapped in weatherproof speakers that are for broadcast. So that's specifically for presentations or live music in the park. So when you hear Christmas music, that's what it's being broadcast over. We do not currently have wireless capabilities, which is one of the difficulties for the band shelter. What I would like to do is have both systems talk to each other and be integrated with each other through Bluetooth speakers or Bluetooth microphones. So when we are doing Town and Country Days announcing, or if there are any announcements within the park, you would be able to use the same system as what's actually currently being used on the band shelter. The thing with the speakers is they do have somewhat of a lifespan. So even though they are weatherproof, they're built to be outside and be built to be broadcast speakers. But technology's come a long way is pretty much what it is. It's progressed a lot. And we actually have our power system in the warming shelter of the band shelter. So there's actually trenching in between them. Ideally, we have everything self-contained within the band shelter itself, consolidate everything, and everything's gotten a lot smaller as well within the past 20 years. So looking to see if we can update it. And then there is discussions as well to see if we could also expand those systems to also have broadcast speakers around the ice rink, not just around the band shelter itself. But it does depend on pricing coming back. This is a project very much in its infancy, so we'll see what happens as we plan forward and do some looking.
Right, thanks.
Yep. The new website has launched. There will be a lot of changes as we start working forward or working with it, see what works best for us, what works best for the public using the website. But I think it is a drastic improvement from what we previously had. Some of the proud things that I like for the Parks Department is, for one, the accessibility of the Parks Department for people who aren't familiar with them. We will have a section for news or alerts on there as well to update people for anything going on in the parks, maybe being special events. And the actual booking system for reservations has been substantially increased and made better. That being our ball field reservations as well as our shelter reservations. Rachel Italiano, our administrative assistant, has processed over 800, nearing 900 ball field reservations throughout the past couple weeks.
Wow.
And the new system has been a huge help in that. And from what I've heard with coaches booking it, there's a couple hiccups that we need to work on as far as user interface things, but it has been substantially easier to do that. So it is a working system. I think once we get through this first year, we'll know kind of what the headaches were of it, and I make it better, but it has been substantially easier for us. Still going to be having drone photography done of all of our parks and public areas, and looking forward to have that being accessible on the website. That'll be sometime this year once the parks look nice and not brown and snowy and icy. So looking forward to that. I have met with a few contractors for also the Bartles Beach Seawall project. One of the aspects of that project is the renovations of the existing archway bridge. This is a bridge that is closest to the actual lakefront, or the historical bridge as people call it. It would include the sandblasting, repainting of it, a few structural repairs, as well as redecking of it. The project in itself, or this is just a portion of the seawall replacement project, but there are a lot of facets to the renovation of that, mostly being the removal of it, the transportation, and then the reinstallation of it. But we will be having that bridge reinstalled throughout that project. But finding the right person to take on a project like that has been a little bit difficult, but it looks like we have a few interested people who are able and willing to do it. This project would be a 2025 winter into 2026 project for that. Other than that, Memorial.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Yes, go ahead.
Yep, there was, I believe, kind of a, I don't know, it was a conversation or a suggestion for looking at a possible I would say extension, like a wall to kind of mitigate the sand erosion. Was that ever a part of any discussion?
still in
Or is that
design
like a phase
processes.
2 or 3 or something that's not in the scope of this?
It would be in the same phase ideally. I don't think this really would be a multi-phase project. This is kind of a one season
Okay.
if possible, just based on permitting needs. And it would have to be done during the dormant season, which is our winter season. I wouldn't want to stretch it out. So where we're at with that actual process is the task order has been complete. That's kind of what each party is responsible for as we begin moving forward with it. And there are dollars attached to that, but we have not completed design or engineering yet. That's the stage that we're currently in.
Oh,
So I'm
okay,
not sure what the
thanks.
design is going to look like. That has been stated as a priority. And we'll see what happens with a couple different designs that come back.
Okay, hey, thanks.
Yep.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Eric, did you say that this would be a 2026 project? I was just,
25 into 26. Yep, so it would be during the winter season, this coming winter season. And then lastly, Memorial Park Playground, I actually met with the excavation contractors this morning. We are under a few weight restrictions for trucking and hauling on some of the roads currently right now. That may cause some issues in actually postponing this a bit, as well as we need the ground to dry out a little bit before excavation occurs. If we do end up pulling equipment in there within the next week or two, it would be very muddy, so we're just looking to see if those conditions dry out a little bit. It is expected, though, that our goal, at least for completion, is the end of this month for excavation, which would then allow concrete and base course work to be done in April, with eventual playground installation being early May. There is some time sensitivity on this because the playground installer is completely booked after May for school district work solely. So that's normally what they do during their off-season, because the schools are closed. They do municipal work in the other time. So they have a very fine window to install this, and it is weather dependent. And then lastly, I'll touch base on concrete work and then pickleball work as well. So we have not opened up the pickleball courts yet at Rotary Park because we are waiting for the final seal coating to be done on the pickleball courts. When we had the footings installed for both the net posts as well as the fence posts that left some naked concrete on top, which we want to make sure is sealed and make it as weatherproof as possible. That work, of course, is also very weather sensitive and weather dependent for those contractors. So I do know that it's nice out, but I would like to have that work completed just to make sure we seal our courts as best as possible. And then we also will be having the concrete work done on some footings for some of the batting cages at a few of our parks as well. That work has also been postponed for the past couple months because it's been winter. So we are working with both of those contractors for as soon as it's possible. They'll get that work completed, and then that will allow us to install our batting cages and pickleball nets. Sorry for the long-winded report, but these next few months are extraordinarily busy for us as we go into our summer season. So are there any other questions? Otherwise, I will touch base on some of the other things in agenda items. Yes. Oh,
no, go ahead.
I had a question. So last time we talked about potentially finding some labor through the Dairyland Baseball Association. I understand they're kind of hard to get a hold of. I'm not entirely sure why. I was wondering if you made contact with them.
so I haven't heard anything back from them. I sent the initial word to them, made a few phone calls and sent an email. I haven't received any applications or responses from them yet.
I did have a question. Do we know what time Smokey the Bear is coming?
It'll be sometime on April 25th in the early afternoon.
Okay,
So it'll be approximately anywhere from 1 o'clock to 3 p.m. That will be at the elementary school for the fourth grade class. We will also anticipate the now Leader Independent, I believe is the correct name, Leader Independent reporter being there to take some photographs as well with the fourth grade class.
very good, thank you.
Yep.
Well, I think it's pretty impressive that there have been 800 or 900 reservations already made. That's really a feather in your cap, and for the city's renovation or revamping of the website, I think it's much improved and much more user-friendly, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, shout out to Rachel. She has been really the driving force behind this as well. So she's processed the majority of those applications and done a fantastic job of keeping them organized. This does include multiple user groups. If all of you recall, we had a tier-based system now for our booking for different user groups on those athletic fields. Those timeframes have worked great for us. From what I can tell, it's been an acceptable amount of time for each user group to prepare their calendars and prepare their schedules for it. And actually, in a week or two, we'll be having our 4th tier begin booking. So we still have another user group that will begin booking on the fields. But as of right now, we have the majority of our tier 3 applications in, which are our private league teams. And so far, it's working fairly well.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Moving on then, if we could take a look at the Parks Board minutes from our February 10th, 2025 meeting and see if there are any corrections or if we're ready to go ahead and approve those minutes. I think everybody's got them, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could we have a motion maybe, or?
I motion to approve minutes.
Okay, very good.
Second?
Very good. Thank you. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have anyone in the room? Do we have anyone on Zoom? No? No? Okay. Would you like to make a comment, Ms. Naughton? No? Okay. Thank you. And has anyone received any emails or calls from the board here?
I had one citizen just compliment the new website and said she used to avoid it because it was so hard to navigate, and said it's really, really much improved. So kudos to all the people involved.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mary?
I received one correspondence today. Someone noticed the motorboat access to Bartels Beach as a discussion point and gave some input regarding their perspective on that topic.
Could you summarize the contents of
Sure.
the email?
Well,
wait till you-
I think when we talk about it, I can bring forward, I think in the context of seeing how that, I don't know what the presentation will look like, so I'll just add I'll add it there if that works for you.
Great. And Jacob, did you say you had something from anybody?
Eric and I have been in contact with the head of the tech center at the high school about the bat houses, basically costs, what it takes to build one of these things. So we've just been corresponding with him. A friend of Mike, who is a expert at bats, got in touch with me and said that we could, he'd be willing to work with us on bat surveys to make sure that we put these bat houses in the right place. So that's my correspondence.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, then I think we might be ready for Mike Nesman's presentation on motorboat access.
Okay. This is in regards to Bartels Beach and the motorboat access. It's a very common and I think increasing number of motorized vessels. Maybe the next slide. Oh, not into, this is a homemade slide. You can't see it, but to your left of that the green line is basically the outline of the swimming area. So, see where the 60 feet is and the 38 feet?
Yeah.
The 60 feet refers to the distance between the swimming area and basically the private area over at Bartels Beach House. You know, that's Phil Manley's place. But if you look at access, it's really about 38 feet because as you come in from the lake, you're getting into trees and rocks. So really where the boats like to come, understandably, is where there's sand and a nice place for them to land. Now, it's very popular, and they come to use the bathroom. It's easy to get to. I've also seen where they've picked people up who park there and then have them come out into the boat. They also like to, sometimes they'll just pull the boat up on the sand and just park it there. And basically, it's a nice place to park your boat. It's almost like a little sand beach for you. They have their dog free and that, and it's pretty common. My concern is that the proximity of the motorboats and the swimmers, to a lesser extent, paddleboarders and kayak who also use that channel. And again, the channel I would describe as a 38 feet. Again, looking up is west. That's the other side of the lake. I'd like to have some slides and some pictures, some videos, and then maybe possible solutions. So if we could go to the next picture. Here's what I'm talking about. You're looking from the beach west. You see to the left of the gentleman there is the, with his dog. To the far left is the swimming buoy, so this is where people swim. They're obviously quite a ways north of that. That's human nature. Next slide, please. And then here's a pretty common site where you'll see a motorboat parked to the right. There's a sail kayak waiting to come in and another motorboat coming in along the edge. That's that corridor I'm talking about between where those lines are and that boat, maybe 38 feet, something like that. Next. Different view of it so you can see how close we are to the swimming lines. Yeah. Next. A little more action shot. People like to, they use that grassy area a lot right by that bench, and people like to come in and get out because it's easy to get to the beach from there. It's sandy. Nobody wants to park further north because there's rocks. You'd have to duck under the trees after you came in. Next slide. You can see the far boat there. See how close that is to the swimming lines? That motor is right there. And then there's people swimming in there. There's two boats. There's really not much room to go in between there. Next. Same situation, but back again, so to really see how it's backed up against the swimming lines. Next. Here's where you see the lines. See how they're bowed out?
Yep.
It was fine before, but now when you get any sort of southwest wind, which is our more prevailing wind, that swimming area shifts northward. And that's a classic to have those, what do you call those, sea-doos parked on the beach. I've seen people take off from the beach, like this guy with kids on that little bouncing, I'm not sure what they call them, an inflatable raft, and they just, or take off from the beach. Next. And there's an example. This actually, it's too bad. The pictures have been, they're too big, and I didn't know how to do this. There's a motorboat attached to this one, and they just pull them right off the beach.
Oh, yeah, I can see the floaty thing in between it and the boat. That little circle thing at the top, yes. That would hook
and
onto the
so
boat then.
there's
Okay.
your swimming area, and these, and remember, I'm just taking these randomly. I go down every now and then. It's not like I'm waiting for these shots. Next picture. And here he's backed up two boats and the people right up against the swimming area. Next. And next one. Okay, now a couple of videos. That's not the Bartel's Beach. That bear.
The bear.
The Smoky Bear.
Did the
He'll
bear
be here
make
next
it
week.
to the? That's a whole other problem we'd have to deal with.
Yeah. Are you working on the videos? Oh, this is the video. Good. Okay. This is what I mean. The wind, if it comes from the north, it just blows. So now you see how it's the same boat. He had to get out and pushing it away. Look where that motor is, right there. Two of the guys taking off, another motorboat waiting to come in. Here's someone just hopping off. And what people do, like to get off and come in because it's nice and shallow. Look at how close he is. Now there's a paddleboarder there waiting to go out, a kid in the water to the lower right there, and here comes your boat. Yeah. That, I think, encapsulates what I'm talking about. So I'm concerned that we are, by default, we're creating a corridor that non-motorized vessels, motorized vessels, and swimmers are using. One possible solution, and again, I understand why they wish to come there. I would think that if we could somehow get the motorized vessels to anchor south of the swimming lanes, you don't get anywhere near the action because it's the seawall there, so you don't have people coming ashore. You just don't see the swimmers going over there. It's much shallower too. So if there's any way, in my opinion, and I'd be interested in the board's opinion, to get the boats to go and anchor south, they could still, come into the boat. It's shallow. They could still go and use the bathroom. But we would remove the inherent tension between swimmers, non-motorized vessels, and motorized vessels. A couple of ways you could do this, one Eric and I talked about, was to move the swimming ropes to the north. Now, I got an email from Phil Manley. I asked him about this.
It's the correspondence I received also.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I think it's probably the same commentary he had shared.
Okay, he just said, I'm not in favor of the swimming area moving north, but I think, I talked last year, I'm all in on restricting motorboats and only allowing paddle crafts at the location. What did he?
Yeah, same thing.
Same thing. And I think part of his concern about moving north, and I invited him to join, I'm not sure if he's on Zoom, I give him information, but if we move them north, we're going to basically, and we still allow the motorboats access, we're just going to be funneling them in close to his dock with possibly impediment of him getting out, or he rents out that as an Airbnb, or the people who are renting it getting their boats out. So you could do that. I think either way, if you did that, it would be, I understand Eric doesn't want signs on the beach, and I appreciate that, but if we had a sign out there, like, let's say move it a little bit, and now on the west you have a buoy, no motorized vessels beyond this point, just there, then they would go south, presumably, because they'd want to use the thing. As far as enforcement, I would assume if the motorboat comes on shore, then if our police happen to be going by, then that's their issue. If it's not, then it would be the water police whenever they're there. So that's basically my thoughts on it. I'm interested in the board's thoughts. I mean, the next step would probably be to talk to the joint committee.
Yep, so at this point, if that concludes your presentation then, Mike, I think it would be appropriate for the board to discuss agenda item B. And do note that that's would be a recommendation to Joint Rock Lake. Joint Rock Lake would really have the purview and the authority to oversee this issue. I just want to make sure that's known to Parks Board. But if there is a Parks Board recommendation to Joint Rock Lake, it would come in the form of maybe some suggestions or thoughts.
Eric, if you did want to move your swimming designated ropes, would you have to go through them for that, or is that something the city can do?
That would be within my authority to move the swimming locations.
So one thought I have. So I noticed the boat traffic. I also have noticed, because I brought this up when we were talking about the mill pond and talking about the kayaks and paddle boards. That also is a primary route to get onto the lake for non-motorized craft. And so my initial thought is, and it's kind of a little sand, but it's grass there, so it's a different terrain, that the beach markers are at the beach. So I really like the water, the floaty part that frames the swimming area goes along with the sand portion, which I really like, and I'm worried if we create a larger swimming area, then now we've created a pinch point for not only the motorized boats, but when you add the non-motorized aircraft, we would be making a problem worse. But I like the idea of a no motorized buoy marker, no motorized craft buoy marker, and education on helping people to understand you can go to the south to anchor, but the north is just not, not of interest. And I think the Joint Rock Lake Committee would be a great place to go with let them have a conversation and see from their perspective. So they might have other solutions, or they might like one of these.
Anita, if I may, I would not be in favor of removing recreational diversity there, basically being non-motorized watercraft. I know that a lot of people do use that location for launching paddleboards and kayaks. I think it's a very accessible location for them to do it, especially early in the mornings when not a lot of people are parked there. I definitely would not want to restrict that or limit that in any way. And that also does not cause too much of an issue with mixing swimmers and non-motorized non-motorized watercraft. What does concern me is the motorboat access primarily. So I am in favor of placing a buoy there. I think that is actually a fantastic idea to hopefully limit some of the motorboat traffic here. My next thought is we do have an accessible location for pickup and drop-off and restroom access at Sandy Beach. Bartles Beach is not designed for motorboat access. It is designed for swimming, and it is a beach. Sandy Beaches by design have piers that do have handrails on them. We have our new piers coming this year as well. We do have both porta toilets and flush toilets at Sandy Beach, and my recommendation would be to have that be the designated pickup and drop-off location. If someone needs to use a restroom on a boat, there's no wake area there that they can pull into and drop someone off on the piers. I would not be in favor of supporting motorboat traffic or encouraging it at Bartles Beach just because we have a designated location at Sandy Beach.
So how do you prohibit people from anchoring on the south? It's a little bit of, if the buoy marker's on the north, unless you buoy marker the entire front of
It's the
Bartles. I'm
design.
just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
I see a lot more anchoring and people pulling up sand washing or sand sitting, I would say, on Sandy Beach more than I see on Bartels, but Bartels has become more popular with motorized boats. When we first moved in that neighborhood, you didn't see motorized craft come in. It's a newer thing in the last few years, I think. It used to be just non-motorized and swimming. And so how do you see that? How do you see it working? Because, I mean,
You couldn't really encourage it on the south end, and I appreciate the input, Mike, but because we have the seawall there, beaching is the adjective for it, or I suppose the verb for it, is pulling your boat onto the beach itself. You don't have to anchor it, you don't have to move it. The seawall is actually on the south side. So therefore, someone would actually have to anchor their boat and wade in the water to get into the beach itself or use the restrooms. So either way, you would be losing some, if you were to actually encourage motorboat beaching on that location, you'd have to lose some form of actual beachfront at that location, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to pull their boat up in the front. My thoughts are, is Bartels Beach is a swimming beach. It's not really designed for motorboat traffic.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And the only reason I was saying is, I don't know how you encourage them to go south, but as long as they don't go on the north side. If they go to the south, then if you don't have a sign prohibiting it, then I don't know what you do, but just the fact that it's the wall there and they're going to have to wade, I think would cut back on it. It's interesting, I had a picture, and I've lost all these. Years ago, there was a sign on the beach that said no motorized vessels.
yeah.
So
Interesting.
Do you recall when that was, Mike?
I'm not that old. No, that's before my time.
There was previously prohibiting of motorboats at Bartels Beach. Okay.
And I can tell you from the RLIA surveys that have been done, the increase on this lake is really in the non-motorized vessels. Paddle boards and kayaking is just booming, and I think that's something we should encourage.
I agree. What I will do at this point is I would like to look in, if it has previously been prohibited in the past, that is something I would look to see if there's been any meeting minutes associated with it, something that I can reference to see that there's been a prior discussion on this. So my understanding right now is when it actually involves watercraft, there really isn't much we have as the city for actual enforcement. That's why I want to make sure that we involve the Joint Rock Lake Committee. However, if we are looking at recreational impairments or impairments to recreation, either be swimming or cutting off of people from accessing it from kayaking, canoeing, I think it would be within the responsibility of Parks Board to make a recommendation to Joint Rock Lake to review it. But I would like to see what past information we have on it. Something that I wasn't aware of, or at least I'm not aware of meeting minutes or decisions that have been made prohibiting it up to this point.
Yeah, the picture I had, I'll look to see who gave it to me, and I'm not even sure how old it is, but someone had it.
So I was gonna ask a question. So, when I first moved to town, we would pick people up on the boat, at those public piers, and it was but I don't know, like, is there a way to potentially add a porta potty to those piers if someone has to use the restroom?
At the piers,
Near the piers, somewhere in the vicinity?
Oh, the
There's
public
the public
piers?
docks, like, I don't,
I,
Yeah.
like, cause I don't know, cause those just seem like that would be the best place to pick up a friend who's not launching a boat with you. You gotta drop someone off early.
I
someone has to use
agree,
the restroom.
and that is very commonly used as well. In fact, when I would boat, that's primarily what we use too. As far as placing porta toilets, I wouldn't really have the capacity to do it at those locations. We have Tyranina Park, but one of the downsides of Tyranina Park is it's a rocky shoreline and shorefront. It's not sandy like Bartels Beach, so it's kind of prohibits it, similar to what the seawall would be. But I really wouldn't have the room, because that is just road right-of-way where those piers are. The city really doesn't own any property there besides the very narrow strip that the piers are attached to. So I don't know if there's really a location for it at the street end piers. And we also have, the main intent behind those is for the city to retain stormwater access or stormwater drainage access. I don't know if I would also be in favor of having a porta toilet there, just based on our actual stormwater drainage and proximity to the lake. But that's not really something I thought about before as well.
Well, I'm just kind of like thinking out loud, like, obviously, if you're on the south side of the lake, it's a lot easier to get to Sandy Beach, but if you're on the north side, there's not opportunity to.
I know the North End County Park is used as well. They do have a pit toilet at that location and have piers. But then again, I understand the convenience, and I get Mike's reasoning here. It is convenient for people to use Bartels Beach. It's the halfway in between point between Sandy Beach and the north side. But I don't know if I would really have the room or capacity at the street end piers.
I think it'd also be interesting if the Joint Rock Lake Committee also looks at like this, you mentioned Sandy Beach has a place where people can pull up and, like, it makes it easier, but if you, I've been paying a lot more attention in the summer from looking at for what happens on the beach, because, we're talking about what we're going to do with Sandy Beach strategy-wise, and I look at it from the water. So if you're looking in and you're standing on the beach looking out, how are people using it, and what do you see? And I think it would be interesting to get the perspective of the Joint Rock Lake Committee regarding their either perception or reality of the accessibility, even at Sandy Beach, because often there are so many boats that have, when you're on the beach, so it'd be on, I know you always call it east and west, and I have to go north and south in my head, but it'd be on the north side, so you're getting close to Woodland Beach. There's a lot of boats that pull in there because it's sandy, and there are boats just all in there consistently right by the edge of Woodland Beach there on the north side. And then I know some of them slide in on the south side, getting closer to the launch, but that's narrower down there, like a smaller area. So I'm just curious if accessibility to restrooms is something that we really want to address, and people, maybe they're going to Bartels now because they can't get into Sandy. I don't know. And so I think that would be interesting to have them look at both while we're solving Bartels, to also understand, is Sandy a part of the problem? Meaning, there's nowhere else for people to go, so then the backup is Bartels because Sandy Beach is too full, or they can't find a spot. I don't know the answer to that, but sometimes it looks really full down there, and I'm always thinking, if there was a restaurant here and I wanted to pull in, where would I go? And there have been a lot of times on weekends in particular where I would say there's nowhere for me to put my boat to go in and get something if we had a restaurant, because all of the spots were already taken, like the squished in, right close to shore. So I think it'd be they may have to, or it'd be interesting to maybe look at them as a whole, because Bartels, the decision at Bartels will impact Sandy, and likewise, if you do something different at Sandy, it could impact Bartels, and maybe that's what's happening. Like, Sandy's gotten so busy, everyone's starting to come to Bartels now.
I agree. Where I'm coming from with promoting the Sandy Beach usage is more of a pick up and drop off location rather than mooring. But mooring is something to talk about as well if you want to actually leave your boat there and use the swim areas or use a restaurant if it is there. I was kind of looking at it as a pit stop location, like if you want to drop someone off on the pier, they can run to the restroom and then jump back on the boat. But you brought up an interesting point to where if someone wants to spend a decent amount of time there and use the facilities at Sandy Beach, I think that is a separate conversation here, but it is valid. Because if you're restricting access somewhere, therefore you're increasing it somewhere else is kind of the assumption you can make. I think that would be most adequate to discuss during the development of Sandy Beach. Is it something that you want to promote? Is it something that you want to deny? Do you want to encourage mooring of boats, or would you rather have a larger swim area? I think those are conversations that we should have during the Sandy Beach development, but it is valid. Like I said, do we want to encourage motorboat traffic to come to Sandy Beach and beach? I think that would be a conversation best had when we talk about Sandy Beach, but it is valid. What's kind of your direction that you would like to have at Sandy Beach? Do you want to encourage it, or do you want to deny it? It's kind of up to the interpretation of what our recreational uses are. Specifically for Bartels Beach, though, I think it could be considered a potential safety issue just due to the proximity to the actual swimmers there. So I think it is a little bit different of a scenario or situation than Sandy Beach, but there are similarities.
And I too have heard some comments from residents about those concerns at Sandy Beach, so I do think we would want to be addressing that at a later time, or it's what I'm hearing, maybe at a later time. Is that what you guys are feeling, or is it during the same recommendation that we're making to the Joint Rock Lake? That it should be part of that, maybe, that it be addressed at a later time by Joint Rock Lake? How do you all feel?
From my opinion, with potential recreational development recommendations coming from Parks Board and review of Sandy Beach, I think it would be best to leave Sandy Beach on its own item. This one does specifically list Bartels Beach, so we are just referencing the area to the north side of the swim lines at Bartels Beach for this recommendation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think rather than muddy the waters by trying to if-then say we have a potential problem, here's our recommendation for a solution, and then see what happens after that. But I think, at least my opinion, my sense is everybody agrees it's not a good idea to be mixing motorboats, non-motorized boats, and swimmers in that relatively narrow corridor to the north of the swimming area.
And kids naturally want to play on those ropes.
Oh, they do.
And that's, so if the boats are interfering with kids, it's treacherous.
Well, that one last video, you saw the kid sort of obliviously walking in, waving to his friend as and it's nice. And most of the time, the boat owners that I've seen when I've been down there are cognizant of that and careful. But you throw in heat, you throw in some beers, people having a good time, it gets crowded. I think we're asking for trouble.
Kids underwater.
So is someone willing to make a formal recommendation to, or a statement that we can agree upon to refer to the Joint Rock Lake Committee? I think we ought to, at least bring up something more specific.
The Parks Board recognizing the potential of safety issues through the mingling of motorboat traffic, swimmers, and non-motorized traffic to the north of the swimming area on Bartel's Beach, recommends that the Joint Rock Lake Committee look at this issue and strongly consider placing a buoy prohibiting motorized vessels from proceeding beyond the point of where the buoy is.
Okay.
Would you be
I'll
willing?
have to watch the video to write all that.
I was going to say, would you be willing to write the language behind the recommendation?
Absolutely.
So where this would go at this point is if Parks Board votes upon it, it would be understood that there would be an additional presentation and consultation basically at Joint Rock Lake describing the issue, what was discussed at Parks Board, and then the intent behind any of the recommendations that are given.
Mike, would you be available to do a presentation to Joint Rock Lake Committee on this?
Sure. I mean, it depends on the time. You'll have to look at their schedule, but I'd be happy to do that if the board agrees with the recommendation and the presentation. Because I'd like to go as representative of the Parks Board, not
Yeah.
necessarily as a concerned citizen.
Right.
So
okay.
when you both spoke with Mr. Manley about his property and where the swim area meets his property, was he okay with it coming, like I'm looking at a map right now, and it looks like it would be as simple as just slightly moving a line. And it, like, it's right now it's a square, but if you got a little bit creative with the ropes, it looks like it would kind of solve itself without a buoy. Or was he adamantly opposed to the swimming area being any closer to his property?
Can I see your picture?
I think the issue I would have with moving it to the north more is that if you're not prohibiting motorboats, they're still going to come in. It's just they're going to come in now what is a narrower corridor. Now, granted, there won't be as many swimmers there because they're not going to go up that far north. There's rocks and stuff there. But I think you are then encouraging more boat traffic right next to his property, probably anchoring. It's analogous. I think you talked about Sandy Beach. As I understood it, there was some animosity between owners along the north there with people parking where some people were where there was egress from that larger development. So I think that's kind of what he's talking about is we're going to be funneling boat traffic right next to his property.
And I also think if you move the ropes to the north on Bartels, then you're taking away the launch for the paddle boards and
And that
kayaks. That's
too,
the only
yeah.
thing, because where you would go, where you see the change of that is his, what was the old, what is the name of the building? He has got
It's
the,
Bartels Beach.
the Bartels building there is like, that's his private
Yeah.
property, starting there. So if you move anything to the north, you're taking away the launch area. That's the only thing.
My only thought of by moving the ropes would be, the boater's mentality would naturally be like, this is too small. I shouldn't do this. I don't want to intrude on anyone's property. It's just too small to put a boat in, a power boat, motorboat. But, so that was just my thought, just if it was slightly farther north, but.
I will say the swim lines do have anchor points that are within the beach though too. We can extend them out with anchors within the water to kind of bow out the swim area, but there are actual large metal spuds and concrete that goes into the ground and they attach to an eye hook. But I mean, we can kind of change where the actual buoy is on the outside as well and place an additional buoy where those anchor points are, so we would be able to do that. My thought is kind of like Mary's though too. I think we'd be kind of restricting a little bit of the other access that I think we're still trying to encourage a little bit, at least within that area, is the non-motorized access, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, as you're walking to the lake, here's your sand here, and over here is Bartel's building. You really don't have that much room between where your water swim area is and the edge of the building. And so you really can't launch from the building. In other words, if you put the swim lines even another 30, 20 feet to the north, then there's no access for the non-motorized boats to launch from that grassy area and that what's left of the sand. Because as you go further north, you hit his seawall, which he has, and riprap.
Yeah, so this is what, yeah, so I was thinking if you,
Yeah, but see this area here, see that's the steps. From here on out, it's either rocky or seawall right there. So there really isn't, you almost, if you're gonna launch, you have to launch.
I guess my point
had
is,
an
I think
aerial
that the
map.
buoy would probably solve the problem you're talking about, but in the process, it'd be nice to add a little bit of swimming area. So I'm like trying to figure out a way to kind of kill two birds with one stone. Swimming area gets a little bit bigger, motorized boats aren't coming in, you know. But you're absolutely right. I mean, with kayaks and canoes and paddle boards and whatnot, it is, you know, you don't want to be invading private property to launch your boat.
Well, I mean, if you wanted to, and we'd have to ask Eric, it doesn't have to be a square. Now I'm kind of changing things, but if we're looking west here, you could have it be, I'm not sure what the geometric
Sort of like this.
side is. You could extend the western edge out, and now, so it comes more like a funnel. I mean, you're-
Pentagon.
Yeah.
Make it a pentagon. You can go out like this and then make it like
Yeah.
a point, like you
I
can make
don't
it more
know
of a
if that-
That
pentagon.
interfere with the private property just north of the beach for launching it?
No, I'm talking about
Okay.
only doing it south, so if you did it like this, here's your beach, here's your current swim area, but if you went out like that, now you've added that triangle.
And that's the
to
south
swim
side?
area. This
South.
is south,
Okay.
and that's north.
So are you
I
talking
think north
like
you're
this?
stuck, I don't think you want to go any
Yeah, on
further
one
north.
side.
Okay.
So instead of going like this, he's talking about going like this.
Yeah, so I'm just-
One side.
On the side that goes to the south
Okay.
where the park
other side?
Like
is,
here.
where the park is.
Here's south, here's your current swimming area, so if you wanted to, if you felt you needed to increase it, you could just keep the same buoy, because this is the seawall. You really, you could keep
Just kind of
that
lower
buoy,
congestion.
Put it
You
out
get
here,
people,
and then you would have
more space to swim.
Okay.
more swimming area.
Why don't we ask Eric what he thinks?
Yeah,
now that he's back
well,
here?
there he is. Eric, we've had a discussion in your absence.
In your absence, the subject of while we're discussing.
The question was,
beach
well, I
bars.
think, Jacob, you were thinking,
Well,
Jacob?
idea of expanding, the idea of expanding swimming area, you know, it's there. It's like kids want to play, and it's, you know, obviously it is getting busier and busier because it is a free beach, where Sandy Beach is a pay beach, you know, so like people, I think, will naturally say, let's go to Bartles. So if we spread people out, give them a little more space to play, I think everyone kind of wins, and I don't think it would cost a dime.
and this is
Yeah.
what we were talking about, if we keep the same anchor, but you just shift the west end a little bit south.
So is this Lakeshore?
This is Lakeshore, you're looking west, here's north, there's south, this is your end of your seawall right here.
Gotcha.
And then if you just kind of, instead of having it go straight west, you went southwest, so you add on this triangle. I don't know if that's doable.
That could be done. The one thing I'd have to check is rope lengths would be the one thing I'd have to check to see how long that rope is. But I mean, very commonly, those buoys will actually get pushed by wind, so they actually deviate quite a bit. I would think we would have the capability to draw it out a little bit more actually to the east towards Manly's on the interior lakeside, if that makes sense. So instead of, like you said, instead of being a square, it would be oblong shaped?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're talking more on the south side, making it oblong like this, not on the north side,
On the south side, okay.
right?
Ed,
Actually, this is separate from,
It's separate from the safety
this
issue.
is
It's
separate from
just,
safety, this
yeah.
is something we can
so
decide.
expanding, you're talking about maximizing and expanding the actual swim area itself. It would depend on rope lengths. Now, ropes in itself, can we get longer ropes to actually do that? Of course we can. It would retain the same anchor points, but we could extend it. I would just have to see, I know we have some reserve ropes on hand. I'll see what can be done for it, but it also comes down to placement too. What if we do just expand them out a little bit further than we have in the past? How much more area are we going to achieve by doing that? I'm not quite sure. The least I can do is try to do it with what we currently have when we actually extend it out, and then see what it would actually take to get additional swimming area by extending the ropes. So I think it's possible. It can be done.
Is there a reason that the south ropes don't go down to the wall? Like they basically end at the beach, but if like hypothetically you took them 20 feet farther south,
You could.
that,
I think it's just the existing anchor point.
Is there a reason, like, do parents, is it so parents can see their kids at all points, or is it, I don't know how shallow it is right there.
That's actually a good idea that you mentioned that. I mean, that could be one of the intents. I don't know the intent behind it. My thought is it was just kind of corralling people into just the sandy area that was previously existing, and the existing anchor point. I assume it could be done, but that's actually a decent point though, too. It would all be within the actual visible area of the beach, the entire swimming area. But I think it could be extended. I don't know how that would play into the material that's actually being used for the new seawall. It has been discussed if we're actually going to install riprap on that portion to actually retain some of the sand that gets currently washed along the seawall, so that material may change, but it does depend on, I suppose, design of the seawall itself when it comes back. But it can, the least I can do is at least expand the ones that are in the water a little bit more north and south extensions to kind of maximize the swim area, I think is the least we can attempt to
Because
do.
it is, I feel Bartles is definitely getting busier. Exponentially, just.
We talked about at our Sandy Beach planning session, when Sandy Beach starts going through renovations to whatever they may look like, the unintended consequences and how that, and the impact on Bartles Beach was one of those that it was just mentioned, and how to make sure that we manage that well collectively is going to be important.
No, one of the.
To your point, so, when it's in disruption, or we have a park closed down because we're doing something to it, and so if there are fewer spaces for people, so then more and more people probably come to Bartles just because it's
Already you
available and
have
it is free,
on a weekend, the parking on Lakeshore Drive South goes well beyond the bridge, probably halfway up to where that hill is, on both sides of that road.
On South Ferry?
On South Ferry,
I
and
know,
then they
'cause it's
also
past
go
my
on Lake
house.
Street all the
Yeah.
way down, both
Yeah.
north and south of where, or east and west where Ferry hits. So it's already very popular.
Yeah.
So I think we have a motion on the table, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so is anyone interested in making a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jacob second. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. So that'll be then referred to Joint Rock Lake Committee, and Mike will arrange for a presentation, right? Thank you. Okay, next up, we have the implementation of pollinator gardens, use of native plants, installation of habitat such as birdhouses and bat houses or boxes on city-owned property. So I think that's Eric, right? Eric and
Yep.
Jacob? Yeah.
If I could, I'll start out with some of the stuff that we have done since the last meeting and how this project has been advancing. And then at that point, I can open it up to discussion. So the first thing I want to touch base on is probably the low-hanging fruit here, which is the installation of pollinator gardens. As I discussed, this department, the Parks Department, am I getting, okay, there we go. The Parks Department does all sorts of other property maintenance around the city, not just involving parks. Those being all of our satellite properties. And this is just general grounds maintenance and mowing on these satellite properties. This would be our well houses, pump houses, lift stations. They all have groomed grass on them. The groomed grass in and of itself costs material and labor to keep it mowed at least once to twice a week. What we can do to both benefit pollinators in and of itself, make things prettier, and also in turn decrease maintenance costs, is taking some of this currently maintained area and groomed area and turning it into sustainable prairies. The maintenance cost in those, the real cost you generally have is a startup cost. That being tilling, aerating, and seeding of these, and then the actual purchase cost of seeds, which are expensive for certain species to plant. But what I see is a little bit of an overhead cost for the installation, but a very minimal ongoing cost for sustaining those gardens. I see the benefits being both for actual habitat development and pollinator habitat, as well as just generally looking prettier if we were actually to install some of the gardens in these areas. And what I mean by gardens is basically prairie strips, is what I guess I could call them. We're decreasing acreage of mowed area in favor of developed prairie grasses and flowers. So hopefully that makes sense.
Eric, have you had success with those? Have you tried them either here in Lake Mills or
Not in
somewhere
Lake
else?
Mills, but substantial success in other properties that I've
Have ya?
maintained within the DNR.
Okay,
One being
great.
my own personal property. I have just under 3 acres of developed prairie that I built and made and sustain now. The maintenance costs are much less than mowing, aerating, overseeding.
Yeah.
There's no herbicide usage within them. What we have is a part-time mower who only job and sole purpose within our department is just to mow lawns. He does a fantastic job and does great at doing it. And he's a retired gentleman who enjoys doing it. But if we could decrease the amount that he's mowing, but still actually maintain these properties, I think it's kind of a win-win, especially if the priority here is habitat development. I think it would be a great pilot program to do this spring. Generally, a lot of these pollinator gardens are best planted in fall, so I do want to make that aware. If you do plant it in fall, you should generally have a larger, greater uptake for some established seeds within spring. They do take a couple seasons to really establish as well, to have generally recurring root structures within them. But maintenance-wise, it is periodic mowing and burning of them. Burning enriches the soil, and maintenance-wise, it's very minimal. The next thing too is mowing, maybe once to twice a season, maybe early season or at the end of the season would help as well, but it's substantially less than mowing once to twice a week. So I have had success with them. I would like to first start a pilot program on some of these satellite properties, seeing what the cost is to actually install them. Installation is just seeding, and then the purchase of seed really is kind of a large overview or large scope picture of it. Like I said, the seeds are expensive. Prairie seeds, if you want desirable seeds and species, it does cost money to purchase them. We do have seeders that would be able to install these. So I'd like to try them at these satellite properties first, see how the season goes, assess again in spring, and see if it's something that we want to install. My first thought is during perhaps having this discussion with Sandy Beach redevelopment, I think would be a perfect opportunity to talk about it, to see if we want to implement them in parks. I wouldn't know where I would want to install them in existing parks currently. Tyranina Park comes to mind with that central bowl area in between the circle actual drive, but I do want to see what the actual cost is to install them before I put them into parks. I think it's a little less stakes if I were to install them at these satellite properties where they're a little bit less visible. See how they turn out. I do want them to be aesthetic. I want them to look nice before I actually install them into a park. So that would be kind of my request and how I'd implement it within this year is first installing them in this areas. And I can do an acreage calculation as well on how much acreage would be basically transferred from mowed, maintained grass to instead pollinator gardens, and I can report back as we actually plan to install them. So that's pollinator gardens for the first step.
So Eric, do we have money in the budget to establish a pilot program yet this year?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm saying if we were to actually install them this year and plant them, there are unknowns, of course, whether these are going to take or not, what species are more sustainable than others. So I think I would like to go through at least one season to see where they're at. But if we're just talking purchase of seeds and the actual planting of those seeds, less than $1,000 for a fairly substantial amount of acreage within them. And then I look at the hours of maintained costs for actually mowing it and everything else as well. So there is an upfront cost for it. Now, the next thing too is seed propagation is also very commonplace in some of these species as well. Very commonly when these species are established, you can almost figure them, if they are established, as self-sustaining habitats and pollinators both being in seed propagation as well. It's very putsy work, but a lot of people take a lot of time to actually collect seeds from these species and repropagate them on other areas. So it's just the initial first startup cost. That would, of course, be definitely an additional organizational project for someone if someone is interested in doing that. But I see it being less than $1,000 to probably have fairly substantial acreage turn around into some pollinator gardens. What I would like to do within this program is give you a list of areas to where they're located and potential acreage of them, just so you guys can kind of see what the progress looks like on them. It is something that I would like to monitor before I install them into parks. I do suggest, though, continuing a conversation when we look at the redevelopment of Sandy Beach, what we can do for pollinator gardens, potentially in unused areas like stormwater retention basins. We're not taking up parkland, but at the same time, you're also having sustained pollinator gardens. So that's my plan for pollinator gardens. Are there any questions, comments?
I'm assuming that bees would be one of the main creatures that this draws in. What are the other wildlife that would
Perhaps Mike can speak on this a little bit more, but this would be a substantial, basically habitat or food opportunity for birds as well. Various different types of bird species both eat these seeds as well as actually use them as food sources for the bugs and everything else that goes there too. Accurately stated.
Yeah, it's the environment, where you start low with your grubs, and then, for instance, you might keep dead wood there because that's where your wood beetles start. And then, of course, you get your voles and the rest that go up, and then you have your bees, your other bugs, and then the seed-eating birds move in, and then you have your raptors that come in and feed on them. You will draw in some small mammals, such as gophers and mice, et cetera, but they're part of the environment, and that's what owls and the rest like to eat.
So what about the, any information on anything more on the bat boxes? We touched basically on that very briefly last month.
Yep. So the last two things here are use of native plants and the bat box portion as well. So we do have Vicki Wycliffe, specifically speaking for native plants. We have a very successful volunteer flower bed maintenance program. Vicki does a fantastic job doing this on an annual basis with a huge amount of volunteers that maintain all of our planter boxes around the city, excluding the actual boxes that are within our streets here, which Legendary Lake Mills maintains. But there's a lot of park entrance signs and maintained areas. There's going to be a list of species that I would like to recommend to Vicki Wycliffe for planting as far as native species. These are native annuals primarily is what's planted. Seeing if there's a couple different ones we can do instead of non-natives, and see what they can do as far as their volunteer flower bed maintenance program. So I haven't went through and actually picked out what species I think would be nice to see within these areas. More than willing to take recommendations if you guys have any in a later time, but we're still early enough in the season. I'm looking to see what will be available and what would be the best as far as encouraging native plant usage on some of these areas. The last is probably the most involved topic. Would like to say thank you to Jacob for a lot of his input as well. What I like to see and what I'm happy to report on is this has been a community-wide project already, and this is just in the infancy of this project. So I have included our local DNR staff, wildlife biologist staff, both school districts, as well as several different Girl Scout troops within here, and I have had also independent citizens reach out saying that they would be interested in pursuing this project as well. So on a high level, this is the installation and maintenance and monitoring of habitat development, that being specifically duck boxes as well as bat boxes. What I want to prevent is the one and done implementation of a project, very similar to what happens with some donated piece of equipment, et cetera. I would like to see this as a annual sustaining project that can kind of be passed down to certain age groups. So once certain classes or troops age out, it would be something that could be kind of inherited by the next coming class of people to really take over this project. So with that being said, Lake Mills High School is interested in pursuing the building of bat boxes. This would be their tech ed program. The Parks Department would be funding the building of them. It's approximately going to be $30 per box. I have worked with our local DNR wildlife biologist, being Rachel Barker. She is new to the area within the past 1 or 2 years here as well. She pointed out a few locations within the city that would be best for some of these. Water source for both bat and duck boxes is one of the largest requirements for them to make them sustainable. I look at areas like Wallace Park, to where we have the drainage dikes and ditches out there. We have Tyranina Park, of course, with the lake there. And then most importantly, I would like to see if we can have some habitat development in the mill pond, being one of the more commonly discussed items here, because I also see this as being a recreational opportunity, not just a habitat enrichment opportunity. I think people would actually take joy in looking at the boxes, maintaining them over a period of time, and just seeing wildlife in general. So Lake Mills High School would be building the bat boxes, And it is planned that Troop 90, let me see here, make sure I read it right, 9046 is another local Girl Scout group that is interested in taking on this project after the actual construction of them. This would be assisting the Parks Department with the installation of these bat boxes, and this is specifically the bat boxes, and then the approximately 1 year monitoring of them. This would be for the award of their Silver Award. If anyone is familiar with Girl Scouts, these girls are approximately 8th grade to freshman year in high school, so it is a project that they are capable of taking on. They're old enough to assist with it, have some individual responsibility in it. And the Silver Award is general for long-sustaining community betterment. So it's not just the first installation, it is the continued monitoring of these bat boxes. The next would be Lakeside Lutheran High School. Their tech ed department would be interested in building the duck boxes. And Lakeside Lutheran also has an environmental sciences program within their science class. I'm not sure if it's an extension of maybe their AP biology class or something, but that class would be interested in installing the duck boxes and then continue this monitoring of them. The monitoring itself is actually a sponsored DNR program. It is on the DNR's website, and they have apps that assist with it as well. There are tools on those that have reporting logs, who did the monitoring, what time, what were the conditions, how many species did you notice. It's all sorts of things that help with documenting what habitat is working for these and what is not. There is the chance that these may not be used habitat, but at the same time, then we know. So even though they may not be used boxes or utilized boxes, that's providing us information in the DNR information where may be a secondary option to install these. Now, like I said, the cool thing is that these girls and the environmental studies program, they'd be able to learn from this, and the general public would be able to learn from this. Like I said, it's something that can be handed down to the next classmates of environmental studies people, as well as the next troop, the next age group of Girl Scouts that comes into that 8th grade and freshman year. They would be able to take this on and sustain a program like this. And if we're planning on 6 boxes per species, I think we'll see how these 6 boxes do, make sure they're actually used. If all of them are used in the locations that they are, I think it's a wonderful program to actually expand out to. And I have had private citizens reach out regarding this program, that it's something they'd be interested in as well, just looking to know where they're at. So with our new website, we would have the capability to flag where these locations are so people can monitor them. The general public can see where they're at and perhaps see some bats and wood ducks. So hopefully this is a multi-scale program. I'm very excited about it. A lot of the organizations are very excited about it. And I definitely see this as being the introduction portion of a long sustaining project. That's what I have so far. And again, this is the infancy of this project. Nothing has been completed yet besides Lakeside has begun construction of the duck boxes. I am in the stages of finalizing the locations for these, hoping to have a lot of these installed probably summer. The reason why I'm saying summer is we're trying to get these groups involved during summertime when school's not in session. Trying to find something for them to do. This would be something that we would install during the day. We would assist, the Parks Department would, and then it just gives them something to do and monitor throughout the summer, ideally creating some nesting habitat as we go into the fall season. And hopefully we have a good reintroduction in spring. Any questions so far? Sorry for the long discussion, but this has actually been a really fun project to work on. And what I like about it is that it's involved several different organizations within the community so far.
You're talking wood duck boxes, I assume. Yeah.
That is correct. Now, I do want to clarify, like I said, we have 6 of each is what we're actually planning on building. I would like to space those out within the community. I don't want to put all 6 on the Mill Pond, and I don't want to put all 6 at Wallace. I really want to space these out as much as possible. I'd kind of like to do 1 to 2 at each of the locations that I described, maybe 1 to 2 at Tyrannino, 1 to 2 at the Mill Pond, and 1 to 2 at Wallace Park. Kind of seeing which ones are sustainable, which ones are working well. Plus, it gives a little bit larger of a pool to see what is working the best, give a little bit more diversity into the habitat, I guess I could say.
So if I heard correctly, then Lakeside has started construction on the duck boxes, right?
Correct.
And then there'll be additional discussion coming up by the Girl Scouts on, this spring. I was having a little trouble hearing.
You're correct.
Okay.
So both Girl Scout groups, I would like to say that the previously mentioned Girl Scout group that we've been discussing is a younger age group, approximately third grade. That is a separate project than involved in this. This project specifically is the eighth grade to freshman year group. That's 9046 in award of their silver award and working towards that. What I would like these girls to do, and in speaking with their troop leaders, they reached out to me for a project. This was my suggestion. What I would like to see, especially with the silver award, I think it would be fantastic, and their troop leaders can say to this too, so I'm not throwing them totally under the bus, is the project from its first introduction to its final implementation. This process also involves board recommendation and discussion. I think it would be fantastic to involve some of these girls within the troop. The approval process is behind it. They're very excited about it. I know they would like to share. So then it's not just coming from me. I think it would be really appropriate for the troop themselves to discuss with you what the project is, what their goals are. And then also I did require them, if they're going to move forward with this project, to give a project wrap-up report to the board as well. So once they are installed and they have been awarded their silver award, they have not completed the project until they give you a final report approximately 1 year to 18 months from now.
I love it.
I had a question. So I know that we've been in communication for the bat houses with Lake Mills High School. Has Jeffrey Lair, who's the head of the tech department, given us a number, like how many bats we can expect per house?
So speaking with the biologist, it definitely depends on the size of them, of the actual bat boxes. The ones we're looking at, they can house anywhere up to 200 bats. So when you're actually looking at these bats, I should have provided some photos. It was kind of funny because I did provide photos to the Girl Scouts, and I was met with mixed reactions to some of the photos of the bats. But these bats, what they actually do, think of it similar to a hive mentality of a beehive. Bees rely on their actual warmth due to the actual friction between them, their body heat. What bats do in a bat box, if you look at a few videos too, like thermal imaging videos, they are extraordinarily warm because there are so many bats packed into such a small area. They retain their body heat. So depending on the size of the bat house, it could potentially withhold like 100 to 200 bats if used.
I think Jacob would like one right outside of his home. Remember, right? You were talking about the mosquitoes.
When we moved here, one of the first things we were surprised by was like how awful it is after sunset, the mosquitoes, and then when you read about bats, like everything I was reading today, something like 6,000, 8,000 mosquitoes per night per bat. And just with a quick little bit of math, that's 7.2 million mosquitoes a night that these bats will eat if each birdhouse is full, or bat house is full. And that's incredible, because like when I love sitting out on the patio and when the stars are out, but mosquitoes just ruin it for everybody. So I love this idea.
So let's look at the mill pond, for example, too. We're looking at, as you guys know, increasing the amount of recreation opportunities at the mill pond. What's one of the most limiting factors of recreation? Exactly you described. It's actually being out there and mosquitoes just attacking you at night. Hopefully what we can do here is not just increase the amount of awareness people have with the environment, with habitat. They'll be interested in seeing what is that house or what is that thing doing there, and perhaps now they know and ask the question, actually look at it and see bats. But the next thing is hopefully the actual mill pond or whatever property these are installed at is a little bit more enjoyable for people. So I think this is definitely one of those things that is extraordinarily wide breadth of outreach within the community, and positive outreach, I guess you could say, with thinking like a pretty minimal program here. It just came up in the conversation, hey, let's install some bat boxes. Well, it has spiraled into including multiple different organizations, so I'm pretty excited about it. And like I said, I think it's a start to a hopefully long sustaining program.
Is it possible to maybe reach out to Jefferson County and potentially look at Korth as a location for one of these things, or are we just kind of planning on seeing how this goes in the city?
It's absolutely up to you guys. You would have the capacity to do the same as well. Similar to the pollinator gardens, I'd kind of like to see where we're at with the use of these before I go installing more. I'd kind of like to see what the small number is capable of doing, what the use is on them, and then at that point, we could expand if necessary. But if we're looking at habitat and these species in general are not defined by city limits. We're looking at the entirety of the area itself. So I think it would be appropriate if this is something we're looking at, potentially forwarding some of the information to maybe the county park system as well. Good relationship with Kevin Weissman, the director for the county parks. And if we already have organizations and groups who are willing to do this with even other groups and private citizens who are interested in monitoring them, perhaps this is kind of a lake-wide or community-wide program as well for more outreach.
A couple of points. First, I'm glad you say if they're used, because as we all know, the bat population has just plummeted over the last 5 or 6 years. Now, there's signs that they're rebounding, but so realistic expectations. We put up a bat house 2 years ago and have had no bats. So, but one can always hope. Second, they do have bats houses out, is that Mud Lake, where the crane or the heron is?
Yeah.
Sandhill Station.
Yep, Sandhill
There's
Station
two
has
bat
bat
houses
houses.
there, because we go out every summer and do bat counts there. So they are around. And third, getting back to the native species of plants, you know where the spillway is, if you're on, across from the VFW, down in there, a volunteer put in native plants. And so you can see how nice it can be. And they do, if they like it there, they'll spread on their own. You don't have to do much.
Correct, thank you. Any questions, inputs? What I anticipate is that I will probably include this topic in a wide breadth as a recurring update at each Parks Board meeting. I'll try to include all aspects of these as we move through the course of this year. I would anticipate as of right now for at least Troop 9046 to bring up the introduction of this program to you at the next meeting. But I would like to kind of keep you guys updated, maybe periodically throughout the year on how these programs are working. And any other questions at that point?
Just one last thing is, part of this should always be to anybody involved, is if you see a bat who's acting strange on the ground, don't touch it, right? Because they are vectors of rabies, not that common, but, common sense, eh?
Correct.
Thank you. So we do not need to formally make a vote or anything. Okay, great.
This was more of a discussion. I know it was a topic at the last meeting. I thought it was appropriate to kind of give an update as far as what was done here. If there's any other recommendations, please let me know. I do anticipate giving you the update in April. At that point, I might solicit a couple inputs as far as species to plant, et cetera. I can kind of let you know what species we plan on planting and maybe solicit some input at that point, and then give you an update where this is. But at this point, we're moving forward, and wouldn't be a formal, I suppose, decision to be made, but moving forward with it.
Thank you. Do we have any other announcements to be made? Excuse me. No? Okay. So, in terms of looking at our next meeting's agenda, we were going to be starting, and I think everybody got the email with the current comprehensive outdoor recreation plan that Eric sent out, right? Okay, great. So we were going to be discussing preliminary aspects of it next time, right? And then last time we talked about looking at the current parks fee schedule, looking at what's going to be implemented for 2025, and then, what we might want to look at for 2026, and including a little bit about the historical patterns or the historic fee schedules to get an idea of what's been done in the past, right? And then we have the presentation, you said, from the Girl Scout Troop 9046, right, for next time?
Yep, that one is confirmed. Actually, this evening, Troop 8249 is meeting. They're going to let me know later this week if they're going to be able to present at the April 14th meeting or not, but I would expect 9046 to be presenting on the Bat House installation.
Okay, great, thank you. And last time we talked about inviting the new leader, news reporter, Chris. He was not able to come tonight, but I think he's planning to attend our April 14th meeting if he's able to. So was there anything else then? Then we want to be adding, most likely, the follow-up regarding the motorboat access to Bartles Beach, right? Okay. Anything else that we would, yes, Mary?
At the discussion session on Sandy Beach, the city council will be discussing a possible resolution to ask the Parks Board for some input on some topics. So I would just pencil that in as it's likely it'll be on our next agenda. So it'll be either in the April or the May meeting, but I'm guessing it'll be April. But I wanted just to make sure we have that noted.
Very good, thank you. And
Oh, if I may add regarding fee schedules, I don't want to make a major time crunch on these, but as we do go through our budget drafting process, I know it's still early in 2025, but we're already starting to plan our 2026 budget. Normally for these fiscal budgets, we look at 1 year in advance. We're kind of, like I said, already looking at 26. If we are to make any scheduled or fee changes, I would definitely like them to be complete prior to June of this year. That would allow us to accurately base our proposed budget for 2026.
okay, thank you. And then previously, we were talking about starting to look at the recommendations that were made by, hold on a minute, I'm looking. The presentation by the ad hoc committee on urban forest management. I don't know if that's something we want to revisit again or start to discuss in April, or if that's a May agenda item. I don't know where things are with that, or Mary, do you have a feel with the city council where things are at with that?
Well, we are using some of their recommendations, I would say, in a pilot format in doing Milton Street. So I think that's where things are at. It is not coming to us that I don't believe until after we see how some of the actions work in the
Okay.
context of the Milton Street redo. And Eric, did you have anything else to kind of add?
Some of their recommendations were specifically creating habitat and pollinator gardens. So that's kind
one
of
of them,
also
yeah.
through that
Yeah.
same recommendation as well, looking at this program that we're developing. So I would say it's kind of an extension onto the tree committee's recommendations as well as including Milton Street. So I think it's an evolving recommendation for the most part.
Okay, so probably after the pilot format has been accomplished, we would revisit that on the agenda, so that, anything else that anyone can think of they'd like to have included for next month's agenda? Are you guys good? Okay, very good. Thank you. So our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 14th at 5:30. Everybody okay with that date? Yeah, great, great. Well, then, I think if no one has anything else, we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Second?
Anybody opposed? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.